The morning sunshine streamed through the kitchen windows of Rick's suburban Connecticut home, casting cheerful light that betrayed the storm brewing inside. I sat at the breakfast table, my arthritic fingers wrapped around a mug of coffee that had long gone cold. At 72, I'd grown accustomed to being invisible in my son's house over the past 2 years. But today would be different. Today, everything would change. "Mom, we need to talk." Rick's voice was tight as he entered the kitchen, Jessica trailing behind him like a shadow. Her face wore that pinched expression I'd come to know well. I nodded, setting down my mug. "What is it, dear?" That's when it happened. The dam broke. "I can't do this anymore." Rick slammed his fist on the granite countertop, making the dishes rattle. His face flushed crimson, veins protruding at his temples. "I'm tired of caring for this burden. You don't live here anymore." The word burden hung in the air between us. All these months of quiet resentment, of whispered arguments behind closed doors that they thought I couldn't hear, distilled into that single, devastating word. Jessica didn't speak. Instead, she disappeared into the hallway, returning moments later dragging my old blue suitcase, the one Tom and I had taken on our 40th anniversary trip to Yellowstone, back when his heart was still strong and our future seemed limitless. She flung it toward the front door with surprising force for her slender frame. "We've already packed your essentials," she said, her voice eerily calm. "Sarah said you can stay with her until you figure something out." I hadn't spoken to my friend Sarah in weeks. They'd been planning this behind my back. "Figure something out?" I echoed, my voice sounding far away even to my own ears. "I'm 72 years old. You have your Social Security," Rick said, avoiding my eyes. "And Dad's pension. The pension that barely covered my medications. The medications that Rick had been managing for me since Tom died." Jessica was already opening the front door, placing my suitcase on the porch. The neighbors would see. Mrs. Patterson across the street was already peering through her curtains, telephone undoubtedly in hand, eager to spread the news. Eleanor Thompson, thrown out by her own son. I rose slowly from my chair, my knees protesting. 2 years in this house after Tom's death, trying to make myself useful, trying not to be a burden. Cooking meals that went unappreciated, watching my grandchildren when asked, though never invited to their school events, shrinking myself to fit into corners of a home that had never truly welcomed me. Something shifted inside me as I stood there. A lifetime of accommodating others, of putting my needs last, crystallized into sudden, sharp clarity. "You know," I said softly, "I've known for some time that you didn't want me here." They had the grace to look uncomfortable, but I wasn't finished. But they went pale when I said, "I know what you've been doing with my money, Richard, and so does the district attorney." The blood drained from my son's face. Jessica's hand flew to her mouth. "What are you talking about?" Rick whispered, but his eyes betrayed him. He knew exactly what I meant. I straightened my spine, feeling taller than I had in years. "Perhaps," I said, reaching for my purse, "we should have that talk after all. Before we dive in, let us know where you're watching from. And don't forget to rate the story from 1 to 10 in the comments. Enjoy the story." The kitchen fell into a heavy silence. Rick's hand trembled as he pulled out a chair and sank into it. Jessica remained frozen by the door, her knuckles white against the frame. "Mom, I don't know what you think you know, but..." I reached into my purse and pulled out a manila envelope, placing it carefully on the table between us. "2 months after your father died, you suggested I add you to my accounts. For convenience, you said." My voice was steadier than I'd expected, but I started noticing discrepancies, small at first, a few $100s here and there. Rick's eyes darted to Jessica, who had finally closed the front door and moved back into the kitchen like a sleepwalker. "You've withdrawn over $87,000 from my accounts in the past 18 months, Richard." I used his full name, the way I did when he was a child in serious trouble. "Money from your father's life insurance. Money meant to sustain me through my remaining years." "We've been taking care of you," Jessica burst out, her composure cracking. "Do you know how expensive it is to have you here? Your medications, your special foods." "My medications that cost $340 a month, covered mostly by Medicare," I countered. The special foods that consist of oatmeal and the occasional piece of fish?" "Please, Jessica, don't insult me further." I opened the envelope and slid several bank statements across the table, each one marked with yellow highlighter, showing withdrawals made by Richard Thompson. Alongside them were printouts of real estate listings, a vacation cabin in Vermont recently purchased. Imagine my surprise when my friend Marge mentioned running into you at your new cabin, the one you never told me about. I tapped the listing with my finger, the one that cost exactly $82,000. It was an investment, Rick mumbled, not meeting my eyes. We were going to tell you. When? After you'd drained every last penny? After you'd thrown me out with nowhere to go? My voice cracked slightly, the only indication of the pain tearing through me. I trusted you, Richard. Your father trusted you. Jessica sank into a chair across from me, mascara smudging beneath her eyes. The business has been struggling. We needed capital. So you stole from your widowed mother? I finished for her. I spoke with Detective Parker last week. He's an old friend of your father's from the police department. He advised me to file charges, but I wanted to give you a chance to explain first. Rick's face contorted. You went to the police before talking to me? Your own son? You were throwing me out of your house before talking to me, I reminded him quietly. Your own mother. The silence that followed was deafening. Outside, a lawnmower started up, the mundane sound of suburban life continuing while my world imploded. What do you want? Rick finally asked, his voice hollow. I looked at my son, this stranger wearing the face of the boy I had raised, and felt my heart breaking all over again. I want what's mine, I said simply, and then I want to leave, but on my terms, not yours. What I didn't tell them was that Detective Parker had advised me to wear a wire, and that our entire conversation was being recorded. Sarah's guest bedroom was smaller than the room I'd occupied at Rick's, but infinitely more welcoming. Floral curtains framed windows that overlooked a small garden, and the bedspread matched the pillows, small touches that said someone had cared enough to coordinate. You're welcome to stay as long as you need, Sarah said, setting a cup of tea on the nightstand. At 74, she moved slower than she once did, but her eyes were sharp as ever behind her bifocals. I always thought something wasn't right with that situation. I sank onto the edge of the bed. I never thought my own son would steal from me. People surprise you, Sarah said, sitting beside me. Sometimes in wonderful ways, sometimes in terrible ones. Remember Margaret Wilson's daughter, the one everyone thought was a lost cause? Now she's a pediatrician in Boston. The comparison didn't help. I raised Rick better than this. You did, Sarah agreed, which means he knows better. This is his failure, not yours, Eleanor. The doorbell rang, interrupting our conversation. Sarah returned moments later with Detective Parker, still in uniform. I'd known Jim Parker since he was a rookie officer, and Tom was a sergeant. Now his hair was gray, but his posture remained military straight. Mrs. Thompson, he nodded, remaining standing despite Sarah's offer of a chair. We've reviewed the recording. You did well. Will it be enough? I asked. Combined with the bank records, it's a solid case. But I need to ask, are you sure you want to pursue this? Criminal charges against your son would mean a public trial. The question hung in the air between us. Was I prepared to see my son potentially go to jail? To have our family's shame spread across the local papers? Could I live with being the mother who sent her own child to prison? What are my options? I asked instead. We could approach him with the evidence and suggest a private resolution. Full restitution for starters. But you'd have to be willing to drop potential charges. Sarah made a dismissive sound. After what he did, he deserves. He's still my son. I cut her off softly. Misguided, selfish, and criminal, but still my flesh and blood. Detective Parker nodded, understanding in his eyes. Sleep on it. We don't need to decide anything tonight. After he left, Sarah brought me a sandwich that I couldn't eat. My mind kept replaying moments from Rick's childhood, teaching him to ride a bike, bandaging scraped knees, his graduation day when Tom had been so proud he couldn't stop smiling. Where had we gone wrong? When had money become more important than family? My phone buzzed with a text message. Unknown number. Mom, please don't do this. We can work something out. Meet me tomorrow at the diner, 10 a.m. Come alone. I showed the message to Sarah, who immediately shook her head. Absolutely not. He's desperate, Eleanor. Desperate people do desperate things. She was right, of course. But as I stared at the message, another thought formed, one that Detective Parker might not approve of. If I met with Rick, wearing a wire again, I could get him to confess to everything. The Bell Diner hadn't changed in 30 years. Same red vinyl booths, same chrome-trimmed countertops, same smell of coffee and maple syrup. I'd brought Rick here for chocolate chip pancakes after dentist appointments when he was small, his face lighting up at the first taste of sweetness. Today, he sat hunched in the corner booth, eyes darting nervously each time the bell above the door jingled. He looked terrible, unshaven, hair uncombed, wearing the same shirt from yesterday. I slid into the seat across from him, my purse carefully positioned on my lap. Inside, the small recording device Detective Parker had provided hummed silently against my hip. Thank you for coming, Rick said, his voice low. I wasn't sure you would. "You're still my son," I replied simply. A waitress approached, notepad in hand. Rick ordered coffee. I asked for tea. Neither of us mentioned food. After she left, Rick leaned forward. "Mom, I know you're angry, and you have every right to be. But please, don't go through with pressing charges. It would destroy my life, my career, my marriage, everything. You should have thought of that before stealing from me." He flinched as if I'd slapped him. It wasn't stealing. Not really. I was going to pay it back. The cabin was an investment. Property values in that area are skyrocketing. We could have made a 50% return in 2 years. "So you gambled with my retirement funds without telling me?" I kept my voice level. "Funds I needed to live on? You were living with us. We were taking care of you, until you decided I was a burden and threw me out." The waitress returned with our drinks, her cheerful, "Anything else, folks?" fading as she sensed the tension. We waited in silence until she retreated. "Jessica and I have been having problems," Rick admitted, staring into his coffee. "Financial issues, her shopping, my business downturn. The cabin was supposed to fix everything. By stealing from your widowed mother?" "Stop saying that." His voice rose, drawing glances from nearby tables. He lowered it again. "I was desperate, okay? The business is failing. We're behind on the mortgage. Jessica doesn't know how bad it is. I had to do something." I stirred my tea slowly. "So you betrayed my trust." "I betrayed everyone," he whispered. And for the first time, I saw a glimmer of the son I remembered, the one who had once owned up to breaking a neighbor's window. "The money's gone, Mom. I can't pay you back, not right now. The cabin's mortgaged to the hilt already." "I see." I took a sip of tea, giving myself time to process this new information. "And what exactly did you hope to accomplish by meeting me here today?" Rick looked up, desperation in his eyes. "Ask Detective Parker to drop the investigation. Give me time to sort things out. 6 months, that's all I'm asking." "And what about me? Where am I supposed to live for these 6 months while you sort things out?" He had no answer for that. The recording device pressed against my hip, capturing every damning word. I had what I needed. His confession, his knowledge of the wrongdoing, his inability to make immediate restitution. Detective Parker would be pleased. But as I looked at my son across the table, I felt no triumph, only an overwhelming sadness. What I didn't know then was that someone else had been listening to our conversation. Someone whose unexpected appearance would change everything. The man who approached our table wore an expensive suit and carried himself with the confidence of someone accustomed to being noticed. His salt and pepper hair was neatly trimmed, his shoes polished to a shine. He could have been any successful businessman, except for the eyes, Tom's eyes, looking out from a face that was otherwise all mine. "Hello, Mother," he said quietly. "It's been a long time. Michael, my firstborn." The son who had walked away 28 years ago after a fight with his father and never returned, not even for Tom's funeral. Rick's head snapped up, color draining from his face. "Mike," I couldn't speak, couldn't move, couldn't breathe. The world narrowed to this impossible moment, this ghost made flesh standing before me. Michael slid into the booth beside me, his cologne expensive but not overpowering. Up close, I could see the fine lines around his eyes, the slight softening beneath his jaw. He was 52 now. Older than Tom had been when Michael left. "I apologize for the dramatic entrance," he said, his voice deeper than I remembered. "But when Detective Parker contacted me about what was happening, I took the first flight from Seattle." "Detective Parker called you?" I finally found my voice. "How did he even know where to find you?" "I never disappeared, Mother. Not really. I just stayed away, as Dad demanded." Michael's gaze shifted to Rick, hardening slightly. "I've been keeping tabs on the family, sending Christmas cards that were returned unopened, making donations to Dad's police benevolent fund in his name every year." Rick's expression cycled through shock, confusion, and settled on anger. "You abandoned us? And now you waltz back in like some kind of savior? Where were you when Dad died? When Mom needed help? Where was I?" Michael's voice remained controlled, but I felt him tense beside me. I was respecting Dad's last words to me, that he never wanted to see me again. I was building a life and a business that now employs over 300 people, and I was waiting for the day when either of you might reach out. He turned to me. "Detective Parker said you never knew about the letters or the cards." My mind raced, putting pieces together. The male Tom always insisted on collecting himself, the way he changed the subject whenever Michael's name came up. "Your father told me you wanted no contact with us." Michael's bitter laugh held decades of pain. "That sounds like Dad, always controlling the narrative." Rick slammed his hand on the table, rattling the cups. "This is bullshit. You can't just show up after 30 years. 28, Michael corrected calmly. "And I'm not here to disrupt your life, Richard. I'm here because our mother needs help, and you've betrayed her trust in the most fundamental way possible." The recording device pressed against my hip, still capturing every word, but now it felt like an intrusion, a mechanical witness to a family wound being ripped open. "What do you want?" Rick demanded. Michael turned to me, his expression softening. "That depends on what Mother wants. I have a proposal, if she's willing to hear it. 2 sons, one who had stayed physically present while stealing from me, one who had remained financially ethical while staying away, both broken in different ways by the same family legacy." "I'll listen," I said quietly, reaching up to switch off the recording device. Some conversations needed to happen without evidence, without witnesses, without anything but the raw truth between blood relations. What Michael proposed next would change all our lives forever. Michael's proposal was simple in theory, complex in emotion. "I want to buy the cabin from Rick at full market value," he explained, hands folded on the table between us. "That money goes directly to Mother, restoring what was taken. In exchange, no criminal charges are filed." Rick's expression wavered between relief and suspicion. "What's the catch?" "The catch," Michael said, meeting his brother's gaze steadily, "is that you agree to family counseling, all of us, and you sign a legal agreement acknowledging the debt and promising no financial contact with Mother's accounts ever again." "And if I refuse?" Rick challenged, though his voice lacked conviction. "Then Detective Parker continues his investigation, and Mother decides whether to press charges." Michael shrugged slightly. "I'm not here to strong-arm you, Rick. I'm offering a way out that protects Mother and gives you a chance to make amends without destroying your life." The waitress approached again, sensed the tension, and retreated without speaking. Around us, the diner continued its morning routine, coffee pouring, pancakes flipping, lives proceeding in their ordinary patterns, while my family performed extraordinary surgery on its wounded heart. "Why would you do this?" I asked Michael, studying the face that had haunted my dreams for decades. "Why now, after all this time?" Michael's expression softened. "Because you're my mother, because despite everything, family is still family, and because I've learned something in 28 years of exile, grudges cost too much." "That's rich, coming from you," Rick muttered. "Mr. Disappearing Act?" "I never stole from her," Michael replied evenly. The barb hit its mark. Rick flinched, then fell silent. I looked between my sons, one I'd raised to adulthood but clearly failed in some fundamental way, one who'd been torn from my life in his youth but somehow raised himself to become the man sitting beside me. The complex emotions swirling through me defied simple categorization: grief, anger, hope, loss, and beneath it all, a mother's endless love for her children, however flawed. "I need to think," I said finally. "This isn't just about money." "Of course," Michael nodded. "Take whatever time you need." Rick looked panicked. "The detective will wait for my decision," I finished firmly. "This is still my choice, Richard." As if summoned by his name, Detective Parker appeared at the diner's entrance, scanning the room until he spotted our table. Our eyes met, and he raised an eyebrow in question. I gave a small shake of my head. "Not now." He nodded and took a seat at the counter, ordering coffee without looking our way again. Present, but giving us space, just like Tom would have done. Tom, what would he have made of this scene? His sons reunited across a diner table, his widow caught between justice and mercy. The thought of him brought a sudden clarity. "Here's what's going to happen," I said, surprising myself with the authority in my voice. "Michael's offer stands. Rick, you will sign whatever documents necessary to transfer the cabin and acknowledge the debt. But the counseling isn't just for you. It's for all of us." I turned to Michael, "including confronting why your father sent you away and why I allowed it to happen." Michael paled slightly, but nodded. "And you," I continued, facing Rick, "will need to tell Jessica everything. No more secrets, no more financial deceptions. If your marriage can't survive honesty, it wouldn't have survived prison either." My sons exchanged glances, a silent communication I couldn't interpret after so many years apart. "There's something else you should know," Michael said quietly. "Something I discovered when Detective Parker contacted me." He reached into his suit jacket and withdrew an envelope, placing it carefully on the table. "What is this?" I asked, not reaching for it. "The truth about why Dad sent me away," Michael replied, his voice tight with controlled emotion. "And why your financial situation is more complicated than anyone realized." The envelope sat between us like a live grenade, the secrets inside potentially as destructive as they were illuminating. Whatever revelation it contained had turned Michael's confident expression to one of carefully contained fury. "Mom," he said softly, "Dad wasn't just a police sergeant. He had another life entirely. And you think it's time you knew everything. The envelope remained unopened as we left the diner, Detective Parker following at a discreet distance. Michael had insisted we review its contents somewhere private, away from curious eyes and straining ears. That somewhere turned out to be a suite at the Marriott, where Michael had checked in after his red-eye flight from Seattle. Rick sat stiffly on the edge of a leather armchair, tension radiating from him like heat. Michael moved with the ease of someone accustomed to hotel rooms, hanging his suit jacket in the closet, ordering coffee from room service without consulting the menu. I perched on the sofa, the envelope now in my hands, unexpectedly heavy with its secrets. "Before you open that," Michael said, returning from the door after admitting the room service attendant, "you should understand what you're about to learn." "Just tell me," I said, suddenly tired of mysteries and revelations. Michael poured coffee into 3 cups, passing them around before taking a seat across from me. "Dad wasn't just a police sergeant, Mom. He was working with the FBI on a long-term organized crime investigation." Rick scoffed. "That's ridiculous. Dad was a local cop in a town where the biggest crime was teenagers stealing lawn ornaments." "A perfect cover," Michael replied without looking at his brother. "For 15 years he helped build cases against the Donovan family's operations along the eastern seaboard." The name landed like a stone in still water. The Donovans. Even I knew that name from newspaper headlines. Racketeering, money laundering, worse. "That's absurd," Rick insisted, but with less conviction. Michael turned to me. "The envelope contains Dad's service record, including his commendation from the FBI. There's also documentation of a trust fund established in your name, payment for his undercover work, a trust that should have matured 2 years ago after his death." My coffee cup trembled in my hand. "I never knew about any trust fund." "Exactly," Michael said grimly, "because someone intercepted the notification, someone who had access to your mail and financial documents." All eyes turned to Rick, whose face had gone ashen. "I didn't know what it was," he whispered. "Just that it was money, a lot of money, and the letter mentioned Dad's service. I thought it was some police pension thing." "It was $750,000, Michael said, his voice sharp as a blade, "meant to support Mother for the rest of her life. Money you diverted to your own accounts." The room spun around me. Spun. Nearly $1 million. Stolen not just from me, but from Tom's legacy. His years of dangerous work I'd never known about. "Why did he keep this from me?" I asked, my voice small in the vast silence that had opened between us. "To protect you," Michael answered. "Knowledge was dangerous. That's also why he sent me away." "What do you mean?" Michael's eyes, so like his father's, held decades of hurt. "I discovered documents I wasn't supposed to see, confronted him. He gave me a choice, disappear with enough money to start over, or stay and potentially endanger everyone. So you left without a word," I whispered. "Let me believe you'd abandoned us." It was his condition. Clean break, no contact. Michael's voice cracked slightly. "He said it was the only way to keep you safe, to keep all of us safe." I finally opened the envelope with trembling fingers. Inside were exactly the documents Michael had described: FBI commendations, trust paperwork, and something else. A handwritten letter from Tom, addressed to me, dated 1 week before his heart attack. The first line read, "If you're reading this, Eleanor, it means I'm gone and the danger has passed. It's time you knew the truth about our life together." I couldn't read further, tears blurring the words into indecipherable smudges. My entire marriage, my understanding of my husband and family, was being rewritten in real time. "I need to know everything," I said, looking up at my firstborn son. "And then we need to decide what to do about the money Richard stole. All of it." Rick buried his face in his hands, shoulders shaking silently. What none of us realized was that Tom's letter contained a warning that had come too late, a warning about dangers that had never truly passed. "Dad was supposed to testify against Vincent Donovan," Michael explained as I tried to process Tom's letter. "The FBI had been building a case for years. Dad's testimony would have been the linchpin. But he died before he could testify," I said, the implications washing over me in a cold wave. "His heart attack." Michael's expression confirmed my unspoken fear. "The FBI investigated. They concluded it was natural causes, but they could never be certain," I finished. Rick had been silent for so long I'd almost forgotten his presence. Now he looked up, eyes red-rimmed. "Are you saying Dad might have been murdered?" "I'm saying there were people who benefited from his silence," Michael answered carefully. "The FBI protected all of us afterward. Surveillance, mail monitoring, the trust fund. But after 5 years with no incidents, they scaled back. By the time Dad died, the protection was minimal. I thought back to those early years after Michael left. The strange cars sometimes parked on our street, the way Tom insisted on driving me everywhere, his obsession with locking doors and windows. I'd attributed it to police officer paranoia. How blind I'd been. Vincent Donovan died 3 years ago, Michael continued. His organization fractured. The FBI considered the threat neutralized. That's why the trust was finally released. And I intercepted it, Rick admitted, voice hollow. I didn't know what it was, Mom. I swear. The letter mentioned services rendered and a case number. I thought it was compensation for something Dad did wrong, maybe evidence he'd mishandled that resulted in a lawsuit payout. I was trying to protect his reputation. By stealing $750,000 meant for your mother? Michael's skepticism was palpable. I panicked, Rick shot back. And then it just seemed easier to keep going. The cabin, the business loans, one lie built on another. I refolded Tom's letter, my hands steadier now. What's done is done. The question is where we go from here. A knock at the door silenced us. Michael checked the peephole before opening it, admitting Detective Parker and a woman I didn't recognize. Trim, 50-ish, with the unmistakable bearing of federal law enforcement. Mrs. Thompson, she nodded to me. I'm Special Agent Diana Reeves. I worked with your husband. More secrets, more revelations. How much more could one day hold? What's this about? Michael asked, instantly alert. Agent Reeves surveyed the room, her gaze lingering on the open envelope in my lap. I see Michael has briefed you. Good. That makes this easier. She turned to Detective Parker. You were right to call us in. Called you in for what? Rick demanded. 2 days ago, Anthony Donovan, Vincent's nephew, was released from federal prison, she explained. This morning, he was spotted in Connecticut. The implication hung heavy in the air. You think he's coming for Mom? Michael asked, voice taut with concern. We think he's looking to tie up loose ends, Agent Reeves corrected. Your husband's files were recently requested as part of an ongoing investigation that may have triggered renewed interest from the Donovan family. Or, Detective Parker added quietly, the sudden financial activity around your trust fund raised flags in certain circles, large sums moving to purchase property. He glanced meaningfully at Rick, my son's face drained of color. Are you saying I led them to Mom? No one answered directly, which was answer enough. We need to move you to a secure location, Agent Reeves told me. All of you, at least until we can assess the threat level. I looked around at the fragments of my family, Michael standing protectively near me, Rick crushed by the weight of unintended consequences, Detective Parker representing Tom's police brotherhood, and this agent who had known a side of my husband I never did. No, I said firmly, surprising even myself. Rising. I'm tired of running from truths and hiding from realities. My husband lived a lie to protect us. My son left to protect us. I won't spend what remains of my life in hiding. Mrs. Thompson, Agent Reeves began, but I cut her off. If Anthony Donovan wants to find me, let him. But he'll be finding all of us, together, and he'll discover that Thomas Thompson's family is not as defenseless as he might think. As the words left my mouth, I felt something shifting inside me, dormant strength awakening. For decades, decisions had been made around me, about me, supposedly for me, but without me. No more. What I didn't yet realize was how soon my newfound resolve would be tested. The safe house was a colonial-style home on 3 acres of land outside Hartford. Unmarked cars patrolled the perimeter, while Agent Reeves and her team established security protocols. Despite my protests, the threat assessment had been elevated to imminent after a second Donovan associate was spotted in the state. 3 days, Agent Reeves had promised. Then we reevaluate. Our first night passed in awkward silence. Rick and Michael avoided each other, moving through shared spaces like wary cats. I spent hours reading and rereading Tom's letter, his apologies for the secrets, his explanations of the choices he'd made, his deep and abiding love evident in every carefully chosen word. By morning, the forced proximity had only heightened tensions. I still don't understand why you never reached out, Rick said over breakfast, breaking the silence as he confronted his brother. Even after Dad died, you knew Mom was alone. Michael methodically stirred his coffee. I tried, sent letters that came back, returned to sender, called the house. Someone always hung up. Rick's expression flickered. That was you? Those hang-up calls after Dad died? You knew someone was calling and never mentioned it, I asked, hurt blossoming anew. I thought it was telemarketers, Rick muttered, but his eyes betrayed him. No, you didn't, Michael said softly. You knew it might be me, and you blocked me, just like Dad taught you to do. Rick pushed away from the table. Don't you dare! Stop it! I interrupted, my patience exhausted. Both of you. Your father is gone. I'm still here, and I won't have my remaining years poisoned by this feud. Both men fell silent, properly chastised. Tom did what he thought was right, I continued, finding strength in speaking his truth at last. He made impossible choices to keep us safe, but he's gone, and we're still paying the price of his secrets. A phone rang somewhere in the house, Agent Reeves answering in sharp, professional tones. Moments later, she appeared in the doorway, her expression grim. We have a problem, she announced. Jessica Thompson has been reported missing. Rick half rose from his chair. What? When? She never returned from her yoga class last night. Her car was found in the studio parking lot, keys still in the ignition. The implication was unmistakable. Jessica hadn't simply disappeared, she'd been taken. This is my fault, Rick whispered, sinking back down. If I hadn't taken the money. We don't know that this is connected, Agent Reeves cautioned, but her tone lacked conviction. My mind raced. Jessica, difficult, materialistic Jessica, was still family, still my daughter-in-law, still the mother of my grandchildren who were thankfully away at summer camp, safely distant from this nightmare. What do they want? I asked, cutting to the heart of the matter. Agent Reeves hesitated. We received a message. They're willing to exchange Mrs. Thompson for you, Eleanor. Absolutely not, Michael said immediately. That's not happening, Rick agreed. The first time the brothers had aligned since reuniting. I looked between my sons, these men shaped by Tom's choices and my failures. Then to Agent Reeves, representative of the shadowy world that had claimed half my family without my knowledge. Arrange it, I said quietly. Mom, no. Both sons spoke in unison. Arrange it, I repeated more firmly, but on my terms. I want to speak to Anthony Donovan directly. Mrs. Thompson, I strongly advise against— My husband spent 15 years helping build cases against the Donovans, I interrupted. Apparently, I've been living under their shadow my entire adult life without knowing it. It's time I looked this threat in the eye. The room erupted in protests. My sons, Agent Reeves, even Detective Parker joining the chorus of objections. But beneath their voices, I heard Tom's words from his letter. You were always stronger than I gave you credit for, Eleanor. Forgive me for underestimating you. What no one else knew was that I had information Tom had included in his letter, meant for just such an emergency, information about where to find evidence that even the FBI didn't possess. Trust me, I said when the protests finally quieted. I know what I'm doing. But as Agent Reeves reluctantly left to make arrangements, I caught a glimpse of true fear in Michael's eyes, the same fear I'd seen 28 years ago, the last time I'd watched him walk away. This time, though, I wouldn't be letting him go alone. The meeting point was an abandoned warehouse on the outskirts of Hartford, neutral ground selected by Donovan's people and swept by FBI tactical teams. I sat alone at a metal table in the center of the cavernous space, the dim light from high windows casting long shadows across the concrete floor. Against every protocol, and despite vociferous objections, I had insisted on meeting Anthony Donovan alone. Agent Reeves and her team monitored from vans outside, weapons ready, while Michael and Rick were secured at the safe house, practically under house arrest, to prevent them from interfering. What none of them knew was that I was following Tom's contingency plan, a plan he'd outlined in his letter, designed for the worst-case scenario that was now unfolding. The heavy metal door scraped open. A man entered, flanked by two larger men who peeled off to position themselves against the walls. Anthony Donovan was younger than I'd expected, perhaps 40, impeccably dressed in a tailored suit with the easy confidence of someone accustomed to power. Mrs. Thompson, he acknowledged, taking the seat across from me. I appreciate you agreeing to this meeting. Where is my daughter-in-law? I asked, cutting through pleasantries. Safe, uncomfortable, but unharmed. He studied me with curious intensity. You're not what I expected. What did you expect? Someone, intimidated, afraid. A small smile played at his lips. Your husband was a formidable adversary. He cost my family millions and put my uncle in prison, where he died. Yet here you sit, alone, seemingly unconcerned. I folded my hands on the table, wedding ring catching the light. What do you want, Mr. Donovan? Revenge for your uncle? Access to evidence? His eyebrows lifted slightly, the only indication of surprise. You're well informed for someone your husband supposedly kept in the dark. Tom left instructions, I said simply, in case something like this ever happened. For the first time, uncertainty flickered across Donovan's face. Instructions? I reached slowly into my purse, his bodyguards tensing visibly, and withdrew a small flash drive, placing it on the table between us. This contains the location of all the evidence Tom collected against your family. Evidence he never shared with the FBI. A calculated lie, but one Tom had crafted carefully. Insurance, he called it. Donovan eyed the drive suspiciously. Why would you give this to me? Because I want this finished. I want my family safe, all of them. Jessica returned unharmed, and your assurance that we'll never hear from you or your associates again. He laughed, though it didn't reach his eyes. That's a steep price for one little drive that could easily be blank. It's not blank, I said with a confidence I didn't entirely feel. Tom was thorough, and he didn't trust the FBI completely. Too many leaks, too many compromised agents over the years, so he kept the most damaging evidence separate. Evidence that would implicate not just your uncle, but partners overseas. People even you wouldn't want to cross. Another calculated guess, based on Tom's letter. By Donovan's expression, it had hit home. What's to stop me from taking that drive and killing you anyway? He asked softly. Killing your entire family? The same thing that stopped you from killing Tom, I answered. Self-preservation. Tom arranged a dead man's switch. If anything happens to me or my family, everything goes public. Not just to the FBI, but to your rivals. To everyone. Donovan leaned back, reassessing me entirely. You know, for 20 years, I wondered what kind of woman would marry a man like Thomas Thompson. Now I understand. He reached for the drive. We have a deal, Mrs. Thompson. Your daughter-in-law will be released unharmed. Your family will be left alone. I placed my hand over the drive before he could take it. One more condition. I want to hear you say it. Why you really came after us now, after all these years. Something cold and calculating entered his gaze. Because someone offered me a lot of money to tie up loose ends. Someone who was concerned about financial irregularities in your accounts that might draw attention. Someone who wanted certain matters to remain private. The implication sent ice through my veins. Who? Donovan smiled thinly. I believe you've already met my client. In fact, I understand she's married to your son. As the words landed, the warehouse doors burst open. FBI agents flooded in, weapons drawn. In the chaos that followed, Donovan's guards subdued, Donovan himself handcuffed, I remained seated, my mind racing with the revelation that had just shattered what remained of my world. Jessica hadn't been kidnapped. She was the one who had arranged everything. The safe house erupted in chaos when Agent Reeves delivered the news. Rick collapsed into a chair, face ashen, while Michael paced the length of the living room, connecting dots none of us had seen before. It makes a twisted kind of sense, he said grimly. Jessica's shopping addiction, the business mysteriously failing despite the economy booming. She's been laundering money. For the Donovans? I asked, still struggling to reconcile the image of my fashion-conscious daughter-in-law with organized crime. Possibly, or for someone else who does business with them. Michael ran a hand through his hair. The trust fund transfer would have drawn attention, large sums moving suddenly after years of inactivity. She needed to eliminate the threat of exposure. Rick hadn't spoken since the revelation. Now he looked up, devastation etched into every line of his face. Did she ever love me at all? No one answered. Some questions have no comforting replies. Agent Reeves cleared her throat. We've located Mrs. Thompson, the younger Mrs. Thompson, she clarified. She's attempting to board a private plane at a small airfield outside Boston. We have agents en route to intercept. What about Anthony Donovan? I asked. In custody, but not talking. The flash drive you gave him was convincing enough to get him to the meeting, but obviously doesn't contain what you claimed. I smiled faintly. Tom was always better at bluffing than poker night led on. What happens now? Rick asked, his voice hollow. We'll need statements from all of you, Agent Reeves explained, and you'll need to remain available during the investigation. But the immediate threat appears to be contained. Michael moved to sit beside me on the sofa, taking my hand in his. It's over, Mom. Really over this time. But I'd lived too long, seen too much in the past few days, to believe in tidy endings. What about the children? Rick's children? The room fell silent again. In the chaos of revelations and danger, we'd almost forgotten about my grandchildren, 10-year-old Emma and 8-year-old James, still blissfully unaware at summer camp that their mother was a criminal, their father an unwitting accomplice, their family forever changed. I'll talk to them, Rick said finally, strength returning to his voice. When they come home, I'll find a way to explain. We'll find a way, I corrected gently. Together. For the first time since this nightmare began, Rick met his brother's eyes without hostility. All of us? Michael nodded slowly. If you'll have me. Detective Parker, who had been silent throughout most of the exchange, finally spoke. Tom would be proud of you, Eleanor. All of you. I wasn't so sure. Proud of a family fractured by secrets? Of sons who had become strangers to each other? Of a wife who had never truly known her husband? But perhaps he would be proud of what we were trying to become now. Honest, united, healing. As Agent Reeves prepared to leave, she handed me a sealed envelope. This was in Donovan's possession when we arrested him. It's addressed to you. The envelope was heavyweight cream stationery, my name written in unfamiliar handwriting. Inside was a single sheet of paper containing just 4 lines. Your husband saved my life in 1987. I couldn't save him in return, but I've watched over you ever since. You were never alone. It was signed simply, a friend. I folded the note carefully, tucking it into my pocket alongside Tom's letter. Another mystery, another thread in the tapestry of secrets that had defined my life without my knowledge. Mom? Michael's voice drew me back to the present. What is it? I looked at my sons, these complicated, flawed men who were all I had left of the life I'd built. Just one more piece of the puzzle, I said softly. But I think I finally understand what your father was trying to tell me in his letter. What's that? Rick asked. That the truth doesn't just set you free, I replied. Sometimes it brings you home. As night fell over the safe house, 3 generations of Thompsons gathered in its kitchen. Michael cooking pasta from ingredients found in the cupboards, Rick setting the table with methodical precision, me watching my family begin the delicate work of reconstruction. None of us knew what tomorrow would bring. Jessica was still at large, the Donovan threat neutralized but not eliminated, the financial and legal implications of Rick's actions yet to be fully resolved. But for the first time in decades, we faced these uncertainties together, and in that togetherness, I found a peace I hadn't known since before Michael left, before Tom's secrets, before my life became a carefully constructed facade. What I didn't yet realize was that the most shocking revelation was still to come. One that would redefine everything we thought we knew about our family. 3 months after the safe house, I sat on a bench in Hartford's Elizabeth Park, watching fallen leaves dance across the pathway. The rose gardens had long since faded, but there was beauty in the autumn landscape, a reminder that endings often prepare the way for new beginnings. Sorry I'm late, Michael said, approaching with 2 coffee cups. He handed me one before sitting beside me. The lawyers had more questions. They always do, I replied, accepting the warmth against my palms. The aftermath had unfolded with surprising swiftness. Jessica had been apprehended at the airfield, carrying false identification and nearly $300,000 in cash. The subsequent investigation revealed a web of deception, stretching back to before she'd even met Rick. Her maiden name wasn't even real. She'd been working for a money laundering operation with ties to the Donovans for over a decade, using my son's business as one of many shells. Rick had been cleared of knowingly participating in her criminal enterprises, though the theft of my trust fund remained a legal gray area that Michael's attorneys had carefully navigated. The cabin had been sold, the money returned to my accounts, and Rick had begun the long process of rebuilding his life and his relationship with his children. Have you heard from him today? I asked. Knowing Michael would understand, I meant his brother. He's picking up the kids from school, then bringing them to dinner at 6. Michael smiled slightly. Emma's excited to show you her science project. These small domestic details had become our new currency, the mundane, precious markers of a family reconstructing itself. Weekly dinners, school projects, holiday plans that for the first time in decades would include all of us. And the mysterious benefactor? Michael asked, nodding toward my purse where I kept the cream-colored note. Any more communications? No, I admitted. Agent Reeves says they've exhausted all leads. The identity of Tom's friend remained elusive, though we'd developed theories. Another undercover agent, perhaps. Or someone whose life Tom had saved during his police work. Someone with connections to the criminal world he'd infiltrated. Whoever they were, they'd gone quiet since Donovan's arrest. Mom, Michael said after a pause, there's something else. Something the lawyers found when going through Dad's estate documents. My heart quickened. More secrets? Not exactly. He reached into his coat, withdrawing an envelope similar to the one that had started this journey 3 months ago. It's about your ancestry. My ancestry. What does that have to do with anything? Michael took a deep breath. When Dad was setting up the trust fund, he ran a background check on you. Standard procedure for that size of account. What he found changed everything. With trembling fingers, I opened the envelope. Inside were genealogical records, DNA test results, and a handwritten note from Tom. Eleanor, Forgive me for one final secret. When I discovered who you really were, I knew it would put you in even greater danger. Your birth father wasn't John Miller from Ohio, as you were told. He was Joseph Donovan, Vincent's older brother. The world tilted beneath me. That's impossible, I whispered. My parents died when I was 3. I was raised by my aunt in Cleveland. Your aunt was actually your mother's sister, Michael explained gently. She changed your name and moved you across the country to protect you after your father was killed in a mob dispute. You were never meant to know. The implications crashed over me in waves. Vincent Donovan had been my uncle. Anthony Donovan, my would-be killer, was my cousin. Did your father know when he recruited me for the FBI? Michael nodded slowly. It's why he chose you. Why he never told you about his undercover work. You weren't just his asset, you were his way into the family. Your blood connection gave his cover legitimacy. So our entire marriage was a lie? The pain of this final betrayal threatened to overwhelm everything else. No, Michael said firmly. Read the rest of his letter. I returned to Tom's words, blurred through my tears. I married you for the job, Eleanor, but I stayed for love. What began as my greatest deception became my most profound truth. Everything else I've ever told you about us, about our life, our family, my love for you, was real. More real than anything in my double life. When Michael discovered the truth about your connection to the Donovans, I had to send him away. Not just to protect our cover, but to protect him from the burden of knowing his mother was being used as an unwitting pawn. I've spent every day since trying to dismantle the organization that would have claimed you by blood, trying to earn the right to the life we built. If you're reading this, I've failed to complete that mission in my lifetime. Forgive me, Eleanor, not for loving you, never for that, but for the web of lies that love was born in. You deserved better. Tom. The letter fell to my lap as decades of memories rearranged themselves around this new truth. All those business trips, the late-night phone calls, the way Tom had insisted on handling all our financial and legal matters. He loved you, Michael said softly. Whatever else was true or false, that part was real. A sudden clarity washed over me. The friend who's been watching over me, we think it's someone who knew the truth, someone who respected Dad's mission, but felt you deserved protection after he was gone. The autumn wind swirled leaves around our feet as I absorbed this final revelation. I was a Donovan by blood, part of the very family my husband had dedicated his life to bringing down. The family whose money had likely paid for my early education, whose genetic legacy I had unwittingly passed to my children. What do we do with this? I asked finally. Michael covered my hand with his. Whatever you want, Mom. It doesn't change who you are. But it did, in ways both profound and mundane. It explained the strange familiarity I'd felt when facing Anthony Donovan across that warehouse table. It explained why Tom had kept so many secrets. As we walked back to the car, I made my decision. I want to tell Rick together, and then I want to move forward. No more secrets, no more looking back. No more burdens, Mikhail agreed. The word echoed from that morning in Rick's kitchen when he'd called me a burden and thrown me out. How strange that his cruelty had set in motion the events that would ultimately free all of us. That evening, surrounded by my sons and grandchildren in Michael's rented house, I felt a peace I'd thought forever lost. Emma proudly displayed her science project, a family tree. I left spaces, she explained seriously, for all the family members were still discovering, out of the mouths of babes. Later, as Rick and Michael washed dishes side by side, an unlikely domestic scene that would have seemed impossible months ago, I stepped onto the porch and looked up at the stars. I understand now, Tom, I whispered to the night sky, and I forgive you. Whether it was imagination or something more, I felt a presence, the same watchful presence that had apparently shadowed me since Tom's death. Not threatening, but protective. Family, in some complex, twisted way. I was no longer a burden, no longer a victim, no longer defined by secrets others had kept from me. I was Eleanor Thompson, daughter, wife, mother, survivor. And finally, after 72 years, I was free. Thanks for listening. Don't forget to subscribe and feel free to share your story in the comments. Your voice matters.